Good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, November 30th. I'm Jane Johnston with the Briar Hill Group at RE/MAX Camosun. Welcome to the Victoria Real Estate Show with...
Hey, everybody. It's Andrew Plink here with LePage and the Vibe Real Estate Group. Good to be here yet again.
Vibing. How's it going?
I'm vibing. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, it feels like things are getting a little busier out there again. Just a little, maybe last storm before the calm, or who knows?
You know, it's funny you say that because before we were able to look at all the stats that we now have the privilege of being provided with from the real estate board, you know, we always relied on our gut feeling.
Exactly.
And so now we actually see, and we're going to see that in the stats today. And then we have an exciting guest today, Del Elgersma, who's a lawyer. He's up with Beacon Law in Sydney, and he's going to be talking about wills and estates.
What everybody wants to talk about, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, titles.
It's a good thing. It's a really important thing to talk about. And we know, my partner and I are going through this ourselves. You know that it's a hard thing to talk about. So let's talk about it. Let's get in there.
Okay. Well, let's start with the stats and then we'll go to the show with Del. All right. So it's November 30th and we have the last 7 days. Andrew, take it away, buddy.
So in the last 7 days, we had 137 listings go live. As of November 30th, we had 137 properties go live. 164 properties went pending. This is the first time we've seen in quite some time less new listings, more pending listings, and it's a pretty significant jump. 77 price decreases. We're still seeing lots of price decreases on that board. 3 price increases, 5 back on markets, 198 solds. 39 expired, still, seeing properties not making it, which is to be expected, and 5 properties withdrawn. If we compare that to last week, the 7 days from last week, before last week, we had, as you can see, 202. Jane's laughing at me because I'm trying to say this in a way that makes sense for everyone. 202 new listings versus 90 properties went pending. So our list to sold ratio has really significantly changed, and it could be a blip, as I said, as we go into the last bits before the quieter season. But yeah, it's interesting to see that. Price decreases 144 last week versus 77 this week. Sorry, 114, and I'm not wearing my glasses. 2 price increases, 4 back on markets, 81 solds, 53 expires, and 9 withdrawn. I mean, what do you take from this?
So it's really interesting. I've been working quite a lot this past week with buyers and sellers, actually over the past 2 weeks. And, there have been people who've been watching the market. And I think sometimes when you watch the market, you think you have time. And then all of a sudden, what we were talking about has actually happened, is that you see a flip. And so those people who, like I showed a property 2 weeks ago to some people, they hummed and hawed and they were considering everything. And it's kind of like COVID. And I always say to my sellers, you don't know what the market's doing. We're going to price it depending on what's happening that day, because this is exactly the flip that we see. These are all people trying to get in before Christmas, and they're getting good deals. I've been in 2 multiple offers in the past week, and we've gotten below asking. But they've been priced high.
I've had buyers reaching out, looking to view properties. I've been making the showing requests or inquiring about them and finding that about half of them are under contract, which, that's pretty significant for this time of year and the way the market has been. Yeah.
So there is no normal, guys. Just go with it. If you like the place, write the offer. This is advice. Very sage advice.
Yeah, they talk date the rate and marry the house, but I also think you should, really don't worry about the timing of your purchase if you find the right property, because the right property will last you for years, and it may not be around when all the other categories of a good purchase are in place.
Well, the other thing is people keep thinking now that there's going to be more choice in the spring, and maybe there will be, but there'll be more competition. And so like somebody finds something that's 90% perfect, or they're new to the market and they're not quite sure that they like it. That's what we're here for, to give them perspective.
And prices typically go up in the spring. We are feeling the weight of the high interest rates, but prices typically go up in the spring. And we've also heard some announcements that interest rates are probably, perhaps, the pundits are saying expected to go down late 2024. So that's a lot better than thinking, well, interest rates are going to continue going up. And it's a big shift in psychology, in your perspective. So I wouldn't be surprised if that does help the prices to go up. So again, in spring, there might be more selection, but there'd be more competition and prices could be higher.
Yeah. Okay, so let's just look at the month-to-date stats. So net unconditional sales are 328. That's compared to 384 for November of 2022. So we're up there. We were kind of worried last week if we were going to make it, but it looks like we're steady. And just remember that during COVID, we were selling 800 a month in, I remember, September, October, November. So we're still slow, but I think we're more normal now. And then new listings are at 793. This is comparable to 785 and up over 612 last week. So 785 for November 2022. So that's pretty normal. And our active listings have come down from 2744 last week to 2680. So we are seeing less listings.
That's the first time I think we've seen less listings week over week in quite some time. So they've been gradually building up.
Yeah. So, yeah. And right now you can, if you want to get a quick possession, maybe we'll talk to Dell about that as well. You do have to worry about the dates right now between Christmas and New Year's. You don't want to be closing then. A lot of offices are closed. And I find lawyers do take vacations, you guys. So there will be some lawyers away. And usually I find it's mid-month to the end of December is not a good time.
Yeah, you might have a hard time getting movers, lawyers, for any kind of professional for, and if something goes wrong, good luck.
Yeah. So I'm planning all of my completions before December, all of them before December 14th. I'm being sarcastic. Okay, so let's talk about Dell. Dell is from the Beacon Law Center. He's an interesting cat. Let me just see here. He gave me some
background information.
Some background information. He is one of the youngest lawyers to be called to the bar in 1992. He's also the past chair of the Victoria Wills and Trust sections of the Canadian Bar Association. And he's the past president of the Saanich Peninsula Chamber of Commerce and currently on the board of the Mary Winspear Center that's in Sydney. His wife, Karen Elgersma, is a well-known, I would say, kind of, what would you say? Well, she actually is a very special person. She is also now, she used to, was it Shaw? Remember that show on, was it Shaw or Rogers? I can't remember, but she does a show called, she's starting her podcast shortly, sorry. And she also is a publisher of Edible Vancouver Island magazine.
Great magazine.
Yeah. So welcome, Dell. Let's add you to the stage. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Welcome, Dell.
We're very informal here.
Dell looks similar in age to us. And I think if I'd started real estate in 1992, I would have been, 21.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little older, but not much.
Yeah.
So Dell, tell us about you. What kind of law do you specialize in exactly?
I do mostly estate planning and business law, and Beacon Law Center does those things as well as probate and estate administration, and of course real estate law. So we do a lot of residential conveyancing as well as commercial transactions and some real estate development work.
Okay, so we're interested in the first things that you talked about, which were probate, and the types of ownerships that people have, we do find, there are people who get into situations with friends or family, or they perhaps have a new partner and they purchase a home. So let's first of all talk about just the type of ownership. There's two types, right?
Yeah, there's when you own property with someone else, there's two options. One is tenancy in common, where you basically own your share separately, and when you die, your share goes to your estate, and it gets distributed through your will. And with tenancy in common, you can have different percentage ownerships with the other person. The other form of joint ownership is joint tenancy, where you own it together equally. You can't have separate or different percentages. And when you die, your share goes to the surviving joint owner. It does not go through your will.
Right.
So I've had some clients ask me this past week, which is when I met you, why everything kind of came together. So they're wondering about actually buying their last house, which I think will be their last house, together with their children, or having them on title. How does the government perceive that? And I don't know if it's federal or provincial when we go through probate, but if you're buying with your kids, can you avoid the death taxes?
Yeah, so we don't really have what I would call death taxes in Canada. There's no estate tax, but you are on death deemed to have disposed of all of your assets. And that can create a capital gain, which results in capital gains taxes. That can be significant if it's a recreational property or a rental property. If it's your principal residence, then there's an exemption from capital gains tax, so there should be no tax on a principal residence.
There's a limit on that, though, isn't there, Adele?
Not right now, no.
Oh, okay. It's in discussions. Okay.
Some talk, but right now it's fully exempt.
Okay.
Now there are provincial death taxes, what we call probate tax or a probate fee, but it's actually a tax. And in BC, the probate tax is 1.4% of the estate value. And when it comes to real estate, it's 1.4% of the equity in the real estate.
Makes
so
sense.
If there's a property that has $1 million of equity, the probate tax would be $14,000.
Okay.
Now, if it was in a joint tenancy situation, then that would be difficult to apply. It wouldn't actually apply that, would it?
Correct. So
Okay.
People use joint tenancy as a way to avoid probate.
Right.
And we're seeing a lot of parents consider adding their children to the title as a way of avoiding probate, so that the property will pass to their children without the kids having to probate their will.
Okay. The way I think about... Sorry, I wanted to ask...
how is that going?
Well, it is a bit complicated because you don't want to, first of all, you don't want to trigger a capital gains tax. So if it's a recreational property, for example, and you add the kids to the title, you probably don't want to actually transfer the beneficial ownership to the kids, because that would trigger capital gains tax. So you're basically just adding them to the legal title, but not transferring the beneficial ownership.
Can you talk about the difference there?
Yeah, so Canada in the tax system recognizes that there's the registered ownership, but there's also the underlying beneficial ownership. And the taxes, income taxes, are based on beneficial ownership. So you can add someone to the title of your property without giving them beneficial ownership. They're basically acting as a trustee, where they hold the title in trust for the parent. And
so there's something additional placed on title to clarify that, is there?
No, there's not. So as far as the title looks, it looks like everybody is an equal owner. But there would have to be a legal agreement in the background to clarify the beneficial ownership.
Okay.
And so then in probate, the taxes would still apply?
No, it wouldn't.
Okay.
If it was set up properly, there is a way that it might still apply, but if it's done properly, you can avoid probate this way.
I feel like I'm already confused, and this is why you need a good real estate lawyer, a good lawyer, state lawyer to deal with this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So between spouses, it's really easy because the spouses are both beneficial owners, and if they're owning their property as joint tenants typically. And so when one spouse dies, the beneficial ownership and the legal title just passes to the surviving spouse. No probate.
Yeah, I guess in the absence of any side agreement, then it's
right.
deemed to be beneficial ownership.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, it's legal. Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to ask this question. We were talking about tenants in common versus joint tenancy. And the way I think of tenants in common versus joint tenancy is, you know, the ownership is 100% for each owner has 100% ownership. And that's why it's hard, or you can't really piece it apart to say when there's an estate that one person had owned a portion of it, it's like both own 100%.
That's a good way of looking at it, Andrew.
And then the other way is tenants in common is, you know, somebody has 75%, somebody has 25%, and it's actually delegated and distributed.
That's
but
correct. Yeah.
Where do those words come from? Because I always have to kind of double think, is it joint or tenant or common? Because they're both really similar words.
Yeah.
Is there any history or any mnemonic or anything you have to?
Just goes back to English law that we inherited from the Brits, and I guess it's probably out of the fact that as we're in a monarchy, and so we actually don't own our land. We have rights to the land, but it's owned by the crown.
Right.
And so maybe that's where the tenancy concept came from initially.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so we were also talking, sorry about all the changes here, I'm fiddling, about trusts. So you mentioned that a son or daughter can hold, or whatever, somebody can hold title trust for the parents. What about establishing the ownership as a trust? Can you do that?
Well, when you create that type of a joint tenancy where you're adding your kids to the title to avoid probate, but you're not transferring the beneficial ownership because you want the parents to retain the principal residence exemption, or you don't want to trigger the capital gains tax on a recreational property, for example. When you add the kids to the title, you've just created a trust, whether you knew it or not. It's called a bare trust, but it is a trust. And unfortunately, under new federal rules, that trust now has to file two annual filings. Under the new Underused Housing Tax Act, every trust that owns residential property in Canada needs to file an annual declaration. And there's not going to be any tax to pay as long as the people residing in the property are Canadian residents. And then the trust now also has to file a tax return annually. Again, there's not any tax payable, but there's a filing obligation now with penalties for not filing. So it's not as doing this type of planning isn't as popular as it used to be because of these new filing obligations.
Mm-hmm.
Does it cost money? Like, would you prepare that, or would a tax person prepare that?
Probably we don't, but an accountant would.
Okay.
It would be a fairly simple taxing, like a very simple form, or would it be very complex?
The underused housing tax declaration, I think most people could probably figure that one out on their own. The trust return, I wouldn't want to do the first one myself, but maybe have an accountant do it the first year and then maybe take over after that.
Follow the pattern from last year.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's what my dad will do.
So what are complications with adding, I'm just wondering because I have a client who has been talking to me about this. What are the complications with adding like if you have 3 children, adding one child to the property and they're the executor? I mean, I could just see that going sideways.
Yeah. So a lot of disputes can arise from that. So the child might argue when the parents have died, well, mom and dad put me on the title because they wanted me to have the property for myself.
Mhm.
And the other kids would argue, no, they put you on the title simply to avoid probate. And really the property is part of mom and dad's estate and you have to divide it according to their will. So there's lots of disputes around that. So anytime that this is done, it's really important that the lawyer documents the intention and has everybody sign an agreement so that
Right.
it's clear what was intended.
Do you mean everybody in the family sign that document?
Party to the transaction. So the child on the title needs to acknowledge why they were added on the title, and the parents need to acknowledge why they put the child on the title.
Is there not a problem, like, you're not supposed to purposely try to, I mean, you can try to minimize your taxes, obviously, but when you're trying to actually avoid taxes, that's kind of can be problematic as well in certain areas. So does that get complicated when you're
Right now, there's no restriction on arranging your affairs to avoid probate fees or probate.
Okay.
That is perfectly legitimate.
Yeah. I know for one,
Okay.
like I would be curious to hear any, I don't know, horror stories is the wrong word, but problems that you've seen come up from, I know, for example, if somebody was put on title and then decided they didn't want to sell, let's say even before the time comes to sell, because they're joint tenants or tenants in common.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you can share in terms of things that you've noticed where common problems that tend to come up in these various forms of ownership?
Well, that exact problem has come up before, Andrew, where the child refused to sell the home when the parents decided to downsize. The child refused to sign the papers, even though they were legally obligated to. So the parents had to take the child to court and basically get an order for the property to be sold, which was not fun for anyone.
Ugly. Very ugly.
If the child becomes disabled and hasn't given someone a power of attorney, then that prevents the parents from getting a line of credit or selling the property because the child has no way of signing and no one can sign for them.
Right.
So I've seen that happen as well. And then the dispute about what was the purpose of the joint tenancy.
Right. So kind of important, again, to talk to the real estate lawyer and maybe set up some power of attorneys for specific purposes or.
Yes, for sure.
Or just whenever you're buying the property, have the exit strategy in place.
That's right.
So,
when Jane and I and most realtors are developing contracts for our buyers, we're not anticipating necessarily how they're going to be going on to title, and the contract is silent on that. So, obviously we encourage them to talk to their lawyers about this. One person may be coming into it with much more money than the other and so on and so forth. But I find it interesting that, it's not our job to figure that out. But it's a really important piece that they need to kind of.
For sure. Yeah, we certainly cover that when we meet with our clients initially to talk about their purchase.
I also find when people are older, they move into these situations a little more quickly than like people in their 20s who maybe date for 5 years. People when they're older, make the decision to move in. And I've had clients who 6 months later don't want to live with that person anymore. And now they're legally tied to that person. And anyway, it just says something about getting your ducks in a row and getting the exit strategy planned before, just in case. Doesn't mean that you're going into it negatively, but
right.
Just be cognizant of all the downfalls. Okay, and then I'm just wondering, what are costs of things like writing wills and agreements like this, and what is the cost of conveying, just so people understand? Conveying a property with a mortgage, let's say.
Yeah, probably around $1,500 for the purchase with a mortgage. And the cost of wills for a couple would be around $750 or $800 at our firm. And for a single person, I think we charge just under $500.
That's cheap given the costs that can come up if you haven't got those things figured out.
For
I
sure.
think it's great value.
Exactly.
Sorry to put you on the spot there, Del.
No worries.
And
Del,
so, okay, go ahead.
when I first got in the business and Jane got in the business at the same time, I remember seeing a couple examples of life leases. And I haven't seen that recently. I haven't seen that really in years. I'm not sure if it's come out of fashion or it's an older style of ownership, but there's alternate types of ownership to joint tenants, tenants in common, and life leases. There's reasons why someone might do that as well. Do you have any comments on that or other alternate forms of ownership we may not see very often, but we should probably be alive to and understanding of?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of life leases myself. I think some seniors developments are set up that way, where the senior purchases a life lease, so they have the right to their unit for their lifetime. And then on their death, it gets bought back, so it can then be leased to someone else. With second marriages, we often see the couple own title as tenants in common rather than as joint tenants, because ultimately they want their share of the property to go to their own family, their children. So often it's set up as tenants in common, but then they will have wills that give the surviving spouse a life estate in the property, so that the surviving spouse has the right to live in the property for their remaining lifetime. And then when the last spouse dies, then the property gets divided between the two families.
That's great. That sounds like it solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, that's a fairly common structure with a blended family.
Because otherwise, in a tenants in common situation, the one spouse dies and the property needs to be sold to clear that side of the estate.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Or with joint tenancy, that wouldn't be fair, because the surviving spouse would get the entire property and potentially nothing going to the children of the deceased spouse.
Right. Okay. That's an interesting nuance. I'd never thought of that.
Yeah.
So, but that survives. So it survives the death of the one spouse, the agreement, and then it's held in place until the second spouse dies.
Correct.
But does anybody ever challenge that? I imagine.
Yes. Yeah. BC has a unique law that allows a spouse or a child to challenge a will if they're not adequately provided for. So if it was a really long-term marriage, the surviving spouse could actually challenge that and say, it's not fair that it's just left to me in a trust. I should have it outright. And on the other hand, children might challenge the will and say, we don't want to have to wait till our step-parent dies to get our inheritance.
Right.
So you have to look at the specific circumstances of the couple to decide what would be fair and what would hold up in court.
Right. In that circumstance,
I have a question regarding wills. I'm going to kill you one day for doing that. He does it on purpose. I'm not going to do that. Now I've forgotten my question. Hold on. Let me think about this.
Well, Andrew had a question.
Okay,
go ahead, Andrew.
In the circumstance where there's a tenants in common, say 75-25 or even 50-50, and there is that agreement in place for the life estate for the survivor, that survivor could then sell the property at any time, and then the remainder would then go to the estate. Is that?
That's sometimes how it's set up, but the will could also say that the survivor can have the property sold and use the proceeds to purchase a replacement property.
Okay.
So the life estate can continue to a replacement property.
Okay.
Or the property could be sold and the share of the deceased spouse invested, with the investment income going to the surviving spouse, and then the capital going to the kids when the surviving spouse dies.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Lots of options.
A lot of options.
Yeah.
Jane, did you?
Just get a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just thinking of all the complications, all the nuances here that, we get asked these questions all the time, and I always direct people to lawyers because they're professionals. And a lot of people try and get divorced, and they do it themselves. Same thing. Get a lawyer, get the professional advice, and just ensure that you are able to leave a legacy to the right people.
That's
right?
a great way to summarize it, Jane.
Yeah, ultimately, it's about knowing that your intentions are going to be covered in reality, and that there's not going to be. I mean, it is important also to talk to your children and all the interested parties so that they do understand your intentions, and that there's an opportunity for them to say their piece, so that there's less chance of this thing going to court. Or
that's right. Yeah, family meeting can be very helpful.
Is there anything, Dale, that you want to kind of talk about or share with the viewers that we haven't really talked about here, or that's you think people should really be aware of that most people aren't?
One little thing is we talked about children being added to the parent's title, and that might create a bare trust with filing obligations. Another situation is where the parent is on the title of the child's home, perhaps to help them qualify for a mortgage, but the parent doesn't have any beneficial ownership. Well, that's also a bare trust. So technically, the parent needs to do those annual filings as well. So not many people are aware of that.
And they can get fined for not doing that.
Right.
Oh, goodness. Okay, well, I'm going to be sending this video out to a lot of my clients so they can contact you. Alrighty. So thank you so much for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
How do people get in touch with you, Del?
Well, they can call Beacon Law Center at 250-656-3280. We have 3 locations, Sydney, Royal Oak, and Brentwood Bay. And my email is Elgersma, my last name Elgersma, @beaconlaw.ca. And you can find Beacon Law on Facebook and Instagram as well.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. And stay tuned, everybody. We're going to finish the show off. But thank you. And we'll send you the link so you can post this on your own Facebook or LinkedIn or website if you want. Okay.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Later.
Hello.
No.
I know he's got like so much information. What was your aha moment?
Well, just how, I mean, it is, you know that it's complicated, but just how complicated it can be as you get into the weeds of how people want to have their intentions, encoded into the law so that they, into their property rights, so that when they move, when something does change, that everything's accounted for. And there is, there are levels within levels within levels on that stuff. So that was interesting to hear. What happens if, there's a beneficial trust, if somebody's got the life lease, and then what happens if it gets sold versus doesn't get sold. And yeah, it's really important to make sure that those things are covered.
The BC law regarding the fact that children or parents can challenge a will.
That's Will's Variation Act, isn't it?
It's very, I guess, well, being in a family where I have a sibling who's doing that, I just can say that, if your parents or whatever, your spouse leaves, you will just follow the will.
Right.
That it's their money.
It's true. You know what? I've seen a lot of times where people get, the family breaks, the remaining family, the relationships break down because there's fights over $500 here and there, or a certain item or whatever. And it's really, really worth it. We see that in divorces too. And that's the whole thing. This is why it's really important to be clear and to know what your intentions are, and maybe to take care of some of these things yourselves before you pass on, so that you've got it really clearly itemized. But I say all that, and I'm pretty sure that my estate will be a mess, even though we're working to put things together.
Yeah. Be careful. Okay. So let's just talk about what's going on. What needs and wants do you have?
I could use a townhouse or small single family somewhere in the core up into West Shore under 750. I dare to repeat myself. I'm still looking for a place in the Fairfield Oak Bay area under 2 million, possibly to 2.2. Nice single family home with a nice yard for a family. I could use a water view condo or townhouse under 700. So we're looking at one over there at on the Island Highway at 455. Looking at a couple of those today. I think the address is 455. But yeah, something with some nice water views around 1,100-1,200 square feet. That's
What's the price point for that?
I'd say under 7. But
Really?
possibly higher. Yeah.
You can find that. That's amazing.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
It's called Water's Edge. It's the one over by the 6 Mile Pub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's 2 right now for sale. One's 630 and one's 655, I think.
Okay. Well, my house on Tattersall got an offer. We have an exciting array of properties coming up in the new year. Actually, we're just getting them ready now. So we have a couple coming up in Arbutus Ridge, and then we're looking for house with a suite in Machosen or Highlands. We don't need a big lot. We need like half an acre if anybody's got anything, and updated with an open concept kitchen. That's what we really want. So, and probably up to 2 million for that now as the price of their house comes up. Okay. So there are what we call sleeve listings. So these are listings that haven't come on the market yet. So I guess if you're looking for something unique, you can contact one of us. We have clients who have stuff coming up in the future, and maybe there's something that's of interest to you. Just let us know. Maybe we can help you out, right?
Sounds good.
Alrighty. By the way, you guys, if you do like the show, we would love it if you could share this information with your friends and family. Don't forget to subscribe to us. We are on YouTube. Andrew has his channel and I have mine. Don't forget to also comment on those channels and share it out. And we love it when you like our posts. So thank you very much.
We do.
And next week, we're going to be on at 9:30. We're going to be doing the stats. And then the week after that, we're going to have a guest from Puerto Vallarta coming to talk to us about real estate there, because lots of people are going to Mexico for the holidays. So we thought we'd invite this guest and just see whether or not, what it's like actually to purchase in Mexico and the costs and all the ins and outs of buying there. So anything else you want to say?
No, I think it's great that we'll be talking about real estate in another country. And I've got a couple of colleagues. We've got some colleagues that have moved down to Mexico either for retirement or to kind of do some real estate down there. And I'm very curious to hear what this person's got to say.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So Jane, how do people reach you?
Oh, goodness. Oh, well, they can reach you to Andrew Plank, 250-360-6106, info@andrewplank.com. You can find him at andrewplank.com and on Instagram as Plank Andrew. And how do you reach me?
Jane, people can reach you at 250-744-0775. That's 250-744-0775. BriarHillGroup@gmail.com is your email, and that is also your web address, BriarHillGroup.com. You can find episodes of this show at VictoriaRealEstateShow.com and check out realtyteacher_Remax_Victoria on Instagram for a lot of excellent local real estate content.
And I just want to say, you are the best friend ever.
Oh,
thank you.
I've been practicing this. Nope. Yeah, fair.
Love you, buddy. All right. We'll see you next week, Thursday at 9:30. Take care, you guys.
Thanks, everybody.